Now, complete chapter on 5 devoted to rest of God, the rest of God. So, what you showed some light on about the rest of God, right? Because the Old Testament completely God emphasizes most on the rest, right? So, how rest is compared to the Old Testament and the New Testament, and what is the current rest of God, current situation, how believers should see the rest of God, how it refers to the Old Testament and how it refers to the New Testament when the author of the Hebrews connects the rest of God to the current and how it relates to our current situation. What is the rest of God?
Okay, so
how
let
can
me
a
give
believer enjoy the rest of God amidst all?
Okay, so let me just maybe say a very cursory remark on the rest of God in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and maybe take it to a deeper level as to how a believer can enjoy the rest of God, the applicatory part to next week when we do chapter 5 in detail. I'm just resisting having to go to the PowerPoint of chapter 5, because if we touch it, then next week we might want to start with 6 or 7 just to save time. But anyway, the idea of the Sabbath rest of God is an idea that we get from the book of Genesis, obviously, from the creation narrative. So what is being said here is the idea of the rest of God seems to complete or communicate an idea of completion. Okay, so in the six creative days, it could be 24-hour creations, depending on where you're coming from and how you're looking at the data and the genre. It could be, epochs of time creation, young earth creationism, old earth creationism, whatever. The idea of the seventh day rest of God is an idea of God having completed everything that he wanted to complete. The creative work of God is complete. And everything is set ready, okay, for it to start moving forwards. So I think that is very important for us to know that God is a God who completes things. Now, when we look at the world, there is so much of chaos that's happening. It almost looks like, oh, maybe God is gone on a vacation or is in a deep slumber. And many atheists and skeptics ask, why is there so much of pain and suffering, and has God left things unfinished, and are things getting out of his control? No. From our reading of the seventh day rest of God, the idea that is communicated is that God is very systematic, God is very orderly, God is a very clear thinking, God is very sovereign, God has a plan, and God executes it as a master builder, stage by stage by stage, and God completes what he starts. Okay, so that's the idea of the rest of God, okay, in the creative narrative. Now, when you speak of the rest of God for human application from the creative narrative, it weaves in an important component in human living and thriving and flourishing, that from time to time, we need to take off from the creative pursuits or the labors that we are engaged in, which has now become part of the curse, and go into a kind of a rest that is very important physiologically and medically for us to recuperate, rejuvenate, for us to maximally function, and for us to maximally thrive. Now, many medical people and people in the psychology sphere will tell us how crucial rest is and how so creatively brilliant the idea of physical rest is being incorporated in the creative narrative, and we are able to see medical reasons for doing that. If somebody is unable to rest, or if somebody is working against his body clock, if somebody is constantly suffering from lack of sleep, we know that they are losing health. They are losing their emotional health, they're losing their psychological health, they're losing their physical health, and so many things go haywire. Okay, so the application of the Sabbath rest is for us to start meditating on the things of God, cease from our busy pursuits, and to enjoy the physiological rest that God has weaved into the biblical narrative by showing that he is intentional about doing certain things in the 6 days or the time allotted to him, and he is factoring in the idea of completion, rest, satisfaction, focusing on things that are eternal and not temporal anymore. Now, coming to the New Testament, now, Jesus is being described in several places, later on in Hebrews also, as to how he finished or completed his work. The war cry that Jesus let out on the cross of Calvary is tetelestai, which means it is finished. Again, the idea of completion. The idea of completion comes first in the creative narrative. The idea of Jesus completing his redemptive task comes in his war cry. You know, the 7 words of Jesus, last one, tetelestai, which is, it is finished. Okay, he's brought everything to completion. Okay, so the process is set in motion. It is not completely actualized yet. But the potential has been unleashed and things are in motion already in one sense, but not yet in another sense. And finally, when we go through, the book of Hebrews later on, where it says, he went and sat at the right hand of the Father. The idea of sitting is again an idea of authority, an idea of position, an idea of poise, comfort, relaxation, and rest or completion. Okay, so he's created, he's finished the redemptive work of God. So creative work is finished, redemptive work is finished. Now, the already but not yet has to be arrived at, and that's what we see in Revelation 21 and 22, where finally there will be the creating of the new heavens and the new earth. And in the new heavens and new earth, we will all be entering the rest of God, or not just the geographical abode of God or enjoy fellowship with God. We will in some ways cease striving. We will some ways cease or take rest eternally from having to make things work and having to persevere in order to continue to be holy and so on and so forth. So we will be eternally in the presence of God. There will be no more pain, there will be no more tear, and we will be forever holy in the presence of the holies of holies. So 3 ideas of the rest of God. I'll leave it at that. I wanted to just say a couple of sentences, but it became long. Maybe when we look at it next week, we'll build on this. Hope that's helpful.